on the line to discuss the Greece-EU talks, which have broken down, and the potential outcomes of a deal not being reached, is Michael Power from Investec Asset Management. Michael, your quick analysis of the situation. Is Greece in trouble here?
I think everyone is in trouble, not just Greece. I think that the Euro team has underestimated the commitment that the Greek negotiating team has to doing something completely different. I don't think they quite understand that Greece and the electorate of Greece have basically decided that enough is enough and they need to come up with a different way of approaching their problems.
What would that different way entail if you could potentially be an advisor?
Well, I think there are, broadly speaking, two potential outcomes. I mean, there are many variants within each, well, especially one of them. One outcome, the obvious one, is that Greece ends up leaving the Eurozone and the drachma returns. It defaults on its debt and has a period probably of 2 years of cold turkey, after which potentially at a lower exchange rate the Greek economy starts to recover. But it would be a very painful route because it would probably involve, for instance, the collapse of the Greek banking system and its nationalization. The other route is a really fundamental root and branch rethink of the way in which these sorts of programs are put into place. And it's not just as a case of extend and pretend, which is what's happened in the past. They need to write off some of that debt, which is 175% of GDP. They need to understand that Greece probably cannot live with generating a 4.5% of GDP surplus just to pay the interest on its debt, and to have the fiscal austerity, which is part and parcel of past agreements. That's not something which Greece as an electorate and Syriza, which leads the current parliament, is going to accept.
Michael, it's so interesting. I want to use the metaphor that Charlie Munger gave us at an AGM of Berkshire Hathaway a couple of years ago. He said, Greece is like your brother-in-law in a family business who spends his day with the family company's credit card in the country club buying drinks. So he didn't think that this could end in anything but tears. Is there a solution that isn't tearful?
There is, but I'm afraid it's going to have to involve the Europeans in particular rethinking the way in which they put in place these programs. Debt write-off is going to have to be part and parcel of it. And I like to remind everyone that the Germans themselves in 1953 were beneficiaries of a 50% debt write-off after World War II, which the Allies, including, interestingly, at the time, South Africa being one of them, was owed huge amounts of money by the Germans, and they wrote down that by 50%. So this, German approach of we're not going to cut the debt is all very well and good, but have a look at your own history, Berlin.
Michael, Schäuble, the German finance minister, says that he feels sorry for the Greeks, that the government of Greece is acting irresponsibly. On the other end, the Greek prime minister says that what's being proposed is absurd. There's got to be middle ground somewhere, but doesn't seem as though they can find it. What would you advise them?
I really think that the negotiators from the Euro side are up against a very different group of people this time. Remember, what he's saying is, when he says irresponsibly, is that they're not playing by our rules. The fact is that the current parliament in Greece has essentially elected a team that wants to play by a different set of rules. So what are we to say of Greek democracy? Are we supposed to ignore it? I think that a very, very different team. And I am always reminded of the simple fact that the Greek finance minister is apparently the only finance minister in the entire Eurozone that has a degree in economics. He's a very, very smart man, and he's not going to be easily bamboozled by the team of people that's been assembled to negotiate against him. So if he doesn't like what he sees, he's going to say no. And I think he's a game theoretician as well, of some note. He understands these things. He understands the game of negotiation. And I think in the final analysis, the Greeks have resigned to themselves that if they can't get a deal that they can work with, they're going to have to turn a tragedy into a drachma and leave the Eurozone.
That was Michael Power from Investec Asset Management.